I spent 5 years working with the NYPD. Basically worked with them to develop a surveillance system for the city. Adversaries want to monetize you. Things you want to protect as an individual are anything related to money. Let me just show you this little guy. These have been outlawed in some countries now to bring in. It's called a flipper zero. It's got a way to intercept TV signals. And so you're in a bar, the remote control signals, and you start randomly turning off TVs in the bar. Yeah. Yes, it works. I won't tell you how I know.
Dave Mosher, it's awesome to have you here.
Thanks, Dave.
So, the audience is going to need to hear a little bit more about your background and where you came from, but I want to set this up.
Okay.
So, I've not only known you for a while, but we share a position as trustees at Ave Maria University, which is a great honor to be able to have. But you're on this show because you freaked me out.
Really?
Yeah, well, because you remind me of all the different ways that people can harm business and harm us individually and personally based on the expertise that you have as, technically, what would you call yourself? A cybersecurity, what would the official way that you would describe that? Because you're getting your PhD right now in
cybersecurity management, yeah.
Cybersecurity management.
Yeah, so right now I'm a new business owner of cybersecurity consulting.
All right.
That's probably the best way to.
Okay, so the title that I would use is "You should be very afraid unless you hire me," corporation.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
that works.
Because it is true. Most people don't even know where they're vulnerable.
Right.
And you can study this and become an expert in it, but it changes the following day. So you have to stay on top of it. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So you're starting your business, and again, what is it called again?
Rendon Cyber.
Rendon Cyber.
Yep.
Okay. By the way, if we're going along and you see that you have a cybersecurity issue or a threat that you have, make sure you put a comment in there about that too, because we're probably going to do a follow-up, and I want to bring Dave on to talk about some of those challenges you have. But what do you think about cybersecurity and the threats that you have? If you love the channel, make sure that you're subscribing to it and share it with a friend. So can we walk into this in a few different ways? I would definitely like to have you talk about what happens from the corporate perspective, what companies need to do.
Yeah.
But I also do want to get into, just the everyday person who's got their phone or their computer on, or they're plugging something in and they don't even know how they're vulnerable, because these things are related. I mean, it's an interesting thing. Before we do that, though, how did you get here to this point? What got you involved in cybersecurity? How did you get interested?
Yeah, so I started writing software when I was in 7th grade.
Okay.
I had a teacher who took
Boy, do
pity
we have
on
that
me.
in common.
What's that?
I said, boy, do we have that. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I wasn't even doing math yet in 7th grade.
And so it's kind of evolved over time. I started and sold a company and went to work at big companies. 9/11 hit, and I wanted to do something for the country, so I went to Raytheon for 7 years. Then after that, I went to Microsoft and was president of a wholly owned subsidiary of Microsoft and grew it from 17 million to 320 million in 5 years. And then I got into security. And I had a former customer who had me go to the world's largest hedge fund at the time. And I had 50 cybersecurity engineers reporting to me. And I got really hooked. This is cool. And like you said, it's always changing, which to me is intellectually stimulating and fun and not boring, basically. And so for me, it's all about how do I stay engaged and enjoy coming to work every day. And this was an area that I could do it.
So what was
that was 2015, and I've been in hedge fund land and cyber land ever since. And so now I'm going back in operations and starting a company around providing cyber services.
Okay, and the company that you built and sold, was it related at all?
No, software company.
Okay.
Back in the late 90s that did software for fitness facilities, actually.
Okay. All right, so, when something like this happens, there's usually a spark. There's usually a moment that says, hey, you know what, without that solution or that problem or that exposure really cost us, now I'm very interested. Was there a moment that got you there, or was it just like a lot of slow drips over a period of time with that many cybersecurity officers reporting to you?
Well, it started, my interest in cyber started before then. Working in the defense world with security clearances and all that, you get to see a lot of really interesting things. and then hearing about how the rest of the world wants those really interesting things. And so, how do you defend against that?
Yeah.
So it really started in the early 2000s of, a real interest in cyber. I started working with cyber tools even prior to Raytheon. But it wasn't it wasn't going to be this is my career. It's like, okay, we need to protect our network. Here's a really cool tool to do it. And it was all based around technology.
Did you have any, you had this patriotic
Yeah.
engagement in this sort of thing. Did you have any shifts where you're like, I think we might have given up too much of our freedom by way of this? And did that relate to cybersecurity at all? Or did you have any back and forth because this is all new? I mean,
right.
Even freedom of speech, took a strange turn with social media that a lot of people didn't expect. Did cybersecurity itself move in different directions where it's like, maybe you shouldn't click that, or you should click this as a consumer and as a company? Did you ever feel like there's this compromise where, in order to keep ourselves secure, we might actually have to ask the consumer to do something that I wouldn't want to do as a consumer? Any tension like that?
Yeah, a lot of tensions. And so I spent 5 years, and it's public, but I spent 5 years working with the NYPD. When I was at Microsoft, and there's articles on it and so on, but basically worked with them to develop a surveillance system for the city. And so there's always a tension of privacy versus effectiveness when you're combating terrorism. There's always a tension when you're securing a company of privacy and effectiveness and user experience. And really the way to think about cybersecurity is not about technology. That's kind of the last considerations, people, process, and technology. I can tell you a story if you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
the more the better.
It happened within the last decade, and I hired a firm to break in. And I won't, I'll change a couple of the details, but it was in a large city, with multiple tall buildings, 20 to 40 story skyscrapers basically. And so hired this company to break in.
So
and
let me just come back to, it'd be considered like a white hat
yeah,
type of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
How does that work legally? Like when you hire somebody to break into something,
yeah.
What do you have exposure, or is this because you were doing this right now with the NYPD, right?
No, this was not NYPD. This was after that.
This was after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that? Sounds like you could get in trouble.
Yeah, you could if you get caught, but no, I'm kidding. So you sign a contract, right? It says, here's the scope of services we're going to provide.
Okay.
And you agree on what the boundaries are. Here's legitimate targets. Here's non-legitimate, stay within this boundary. Could be things like don't take down a production system, for example, right? And so you define what makes sense for your business based on your risk tolerance and how much you really want to understand about what's going on. And so I'll get back to that later, but from a culture perspective, you have leaders who want to hide problems, and you have leaders who want the problems put on the table right away. What sort of culture do you have? So if you hire somebody to break in, do you actually want to know? Or do you just do it as a gold check mark and say, okay, just test this one system and we're done, and we can tell everyone that we're safe.
Yeah.
Right. And so all of that is part of the negotiation of the scope.
What do you see mostly with the leaders? Are they trying to just check it off the list, or they really want to know if they're vulnerable?
Yeah, so when you have alignment with the business goals, it's 100% visibility, right? We need to stand up this new marketing platform, and we're going to store customer data on this marketing platform. It'd be really bad. I call it the Wall Street Journal test. It'd be really bad if that customer information showed up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I need someone to tell me that it's safe to store the data on that platform. That's a great example of alignment with business goals.
Yeah.
A bad example is where you have someone's Macintosh or their PC, and it's got literally 12 to 15 to 20 agents on it running all these technological security things, and they can't work.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a balance in between, disconnecting from the internet or disconnecting from a network and being fully aligned with business goals and enabling the business.
See, the thing is, I see even when you're talking about aligning with the business, there's always somebody who is like, it was their job to keep this safe, and it wasn't happening, and so they want to hide what you're about to discover, because it goes on their record as failing previously, as opposed to looking at it as a part of their responsibility. There's always somebody that's trying to cover their own ass. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. And it'd be interesting to see how that actually affects what you do. But nothing like that, it comes out?
Well, look, so if it does come out. So I get back to the culture again.
Yeah.
People, process, technology. People being, kind of substitute the word culture for that. If you have a team that wants the best and wants to excel and wants to have collaboration and knock down all the barriers that are in the way, they want to know.
Yeah.
If you're in a large bureaucracy, they just want to check in every day and 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 with their phone or whatever it is. They just don't want to disrupt the apple cart. That's a problem. And sometimes it's the IT people, sometimes it's the CFO, sometimes it can come at you from all sorts of different angles.
So you have to battle that yourself to get the things done that you want to do, or you're basically signing a contract and doing that, and then they're dealing with each other.
Yeah, so number one rule is you need buy-in from the top.
Okay.
Right, and so there's all sorts of different organizational structures you can have when it comes to security. You could have someone reporting to IT. My view, that's kind of like the fox watch in the middle of the hen house, right? Because they're running all the systems.
Yeah.
And the CIO may be that person that says, you know what, that's not great. We're just going to bury this report, right? You may want reporting to the CFO. My personal view, there's all sorts of structures that work.
Yeah.
My personal view is you have them report to the CEO, and then you have them do quarterly reports to the board, the person in charge of security, whether it's a chief security officer or chief information security officer.
Yeah.
And so it's known throughout the organization that, look, security means a lot to us.
Yeah.
We have a culture of security. This could kill us if we're not careful. There's existential risks. And we want to do the best thing we can for our customers and not hurt revenue production.
Okay, so I interrupt your story, and people are probably saying, "Hey, man, let him finish his story."
No, it's okay. So large, small company, call it 100 employees, in the middle of a downtown area, and so kind of just trying to paint the picture for you a little bit. But you go into these big buildings, and there's a restaurant and a coffee shop on the ground floor. A lot of times, there's a big front desk with security for the building, and basically they run point for all the different floors. You might have, if you got 20 floors, or 40 floors, you might have 15, 20 different businesses that take up the various floors. But you have to get through the main desk, and then you can get through the turnstiles, then you can get into the elevator, then you can get up to the floor, and there's another access control system, right? And so you kind of think about it and say, that's pretty smart. No one's going to get in. We're safe. Well, so I hired this company. And oh, by the way, the one contractual thing I didn't mention to you was they call it a get out of jail free card. It's a letter signed by me in this case that says they're authorized to do this. Here's my contact information. Call me.
Okay.
In case they get caught by security or someone calls the
Yeah.
police or something like that, right?
By the way, when you said this before, I was imagining like this kind of white hat going on, but like you literally have the burglar going in and.
Well, I want to get back to that because that's kind of part of the point I want to make is it's both.
Okay.
Right? And so let me come back to that point for a second, but it's both, right?
Okay.
And so how did they get in? They got in and they compromised everything. And so there's this little coffee shop on the ground floor at breakfast, at lunch, and as people were leaving for the day, they sat in the coffee shop. It was just two guys in a suit, and one of them had a satchel on, like you just think he's walking the streets of the city and going to work. Sipped a coffee for, I think you said 6 hours between those three different things. And all they did was just sit there and talk, the two of them. Well, inside that satchel was a $3,000 piece of hardware that they had built that if you got within 30 feet of them, it read your access card to the building. So then and to the company they were targeting, which was, up many, many stories. They went back to their hotel at the end of the night. They looked at all the cards. They discarded all the ones that were not for the floor they were trying to access. And and then they reproduced those cards.
Unbelievable.
They came in at 3 o'clock in the morning when just the cleaning crew is there, used it to get through the turnstile, just kind of waved like they belonged to the front desk. They had a card, so at night the building's locked, so they use their card to get in. Front desk is like, hey, how you doing? There's so many people coming and going, hundreds and maybe thousands of people a day coming in and out of these buildings. They don't know who's there. And they're trusting the access control reader system that locks the building at 3 o'clock in the morning. Great. So then they went in, they went through the turnstile, which before you can get the elevator, you now have a turnstile. So that's 3 different methods they've just breached: the front door, the front desk, and now the turnstile. Got in the elevator, went to the floor that they were trying to breach. Well, it has its own access control system. So this is the actual company.
Yeah.
And like, wow, what are we going to do here? And they notice that it's glass doors. Yeah, there's an access control system, but the glass doors have a little bit of a gap underneath. And for convenience, when you walk towards the door, there's these thing called REX sensors. They trigger so that as you're coming out, you can just push the door open. And then it defaults back to a locked position. So if you're coming in the other way from the outside, there's access control.
Okay.
They took a can of compressed air, they put it under that little gap and sprayed it to trigger the motion sensor on the other door. Click, it opens up. So now they've got access to the facility.
This is like this is like a movie.
It is.
Yes.
And I actually hired the team, right? And so this is real. This is not made up. This is legitimate. This is what these people do. So now you've got access to a floor. They went through people's offices. They confiscated paperwork that was on desks. They went through file cabinets. They got social security numbers of employees. They got business critical and confidential memos. They went into the network room and
you brought some toys for us
and started.
So this is your 007 kit.
Yeah, well, yes. So you can do things like put implants, they're called, on the network. And so this particular one captures network traffic. So if you plug it into a computer, it's got a radio in it, and so remotely they have full access to your computer. So now you have physical access. This one you plug in, and you've got full access to the network. You just plug into someone's USB port on the computer.
Where do you get these?
They're widely available. This is a particular company called Hack5, which is very well known for penetration testing. HAK5. You can look up their website. They have cables.
So 2 things. These are legal to buy.
These are legal to buy.
Okay. Is there such thing as a non-nefarious reason to use them? I mean,
well, yeah. So I hired this company.
Well, no. I mean, like, would a guy like me who's not doing anything related to cybersecurity ever have a need for using that for my own company, just internally, or
No.
Okay, so when people buy that, they're either white hat, trying to help security, or they're the bad guys.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're the type of guy who you want to be your friend.
Right. So people, process, and technology. Go back to people. It all depends on the ethical side of the boundary that you live on.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same tools that you use to test and defend. Literally, in some cases, same software. We're running the same tests that a bad person might, we call them adversaries, an adversary might use. So they got in, they stole hard drives. They went into the server room, which wasn't alarmed at the time. They put a bunch of implants in there, including an implant that captured all the network traffic on that floor and then sent it back to their website, command and control server. They ended up compromising email. And at the time of the year, they compromised an administrative assistant who was working for one of the C-level executives, and they're discussing bonus information for all the employees. So they were able to grab the bonus information for all the employees by accessing that person's email. They moved into servers. They compromised the entire directory structure for the servers. Okay, so I could go on.
Yes.
The ending to this was, I printed up a fake headline of the Wall Street Journal, and I called a meeting the next day and said, guys, when you come, just trigger the printers. So from their hotel room, they triggered the printers to just start spewing random pieces of paper with writing on it. Basically, a little bit of theater now.
Yes,
like
of course.
just to make the point that, hey, look, we're compromised.
Yeah.
Passed around this fake headline, and it says, all of our secrets are now out on the dark web. There's lawsuits coming. Boom, 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 boom. Everyone was scared, and so that led to.
What year was this?
I don't want to get into it because you might be able to narrow down who I did it for. So
all right, let me just say this: is this recent enough that technology remains kind of the same, or has it evolved so much that you would need to do this in a different way? And if you don't want to answer that, you don't have to.
No, it's exactly the same way.
Okay.
It's within the last decade.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I mean, a little bit of the software might have changed. There's some differences. There are some slight differences. RFID has different encryption now for the access control cards, things like that. So there are some differences.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really matter because adversaries will just find a new hole.
Yeah, they'll find a new way to do it.
Right. And so we had a meeting with, the 60 people or whatever were in the office that day, and I passed around the headline, and I told the two penetration testers, just show up at our 11 o'clock meeting. So they got in the same way. Now it's the middle of the day. They choose their access control card. They look like every other person. They got right up to the floor. They used the compressed air to get into the office. No one noticed. And they just literally showed up at this meeting with 60 people standing on the outside. No one even noticed them there.
And this was at a time that nobody was even supposed to be able to get up there.
Well, this is in the middle of the workday.
Okay, middle of the workday.
Yeah, this is the middle of the workday, but they had figured out how to get in.
Yeah.
Right? And actually, at that point, they had already had access to control cards for that office. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't even need the compressed air the second time. They just used the access control system to walk right in.
Wow.
So I want to point out a couple different things about this, right? Cybersecurity depends on simplicity. Think about the complexity that I described to you. And this is kind of the lesson for companies and the lesson for individuals as well. Okay, we've got an access control outside the door. We've got a front desk. We've got access control at the front at the elevator bank. We've got access control card getting into the office. We've got doors and locked doors in the office. We don't have a safe. We don't have a clean desk policy. Like all these different things. The server room, we have a different room in IT that wasn't locked, that wasn't alarmed, that wasn't monitored, that people could get into. So adversaries are going to take advantage of complexity. And I use a physical story mainly because it's easy to visualize. Now imagine that as a virtual story. You've got digital assets. You've got a website. You've got a SaaS application that you use for customer data. They're going to find ways to abuse that complexity. So the number one rule in security is the simpler the better. And a lot of times people will apply these complicated technology solutions.
So it would seem to me,
Yep.
on the surface, that's counterintuitive.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, if you've got this and then this and this and this, as opposed to one thing that you could just crack the code and get in all the way, but you just have to make that one thing invincible, because if they get past that, they get past everything. Am I wrong about?
Well, no. So I don't want to imply that it's a single defense mechanism.
Okay.
But if you're running multiple SaaS applications in multiple public clouds, as well as a hybrid environment, think about the complexity that's going on there. Mm-hmm. So, Dave, you're a customer, and you're buying a widget from my company. Your data comes in through a website, which is hosted on, AWS, right? And it's stored on a database, which is on-prem in my own data center. So the website's just the front end, the data gets stored in the database. And then analytics is done in Microsoft Azure Cloud, right? And so that's what I mean by complexity, is that from an IT and a system perspective, you've got all these different products and all these different services where data is traveling through. It's complex. There's a case to be made that the fewer vendors you deal with, the better vendors that you deal with, is a much better world than kind of hand-picking best-of-breed complexity. Defense is always about layers, so that's what I want to push back a little bit on, the one thing.
Yeah, right.
You want multiple layers. In the case of the access control card, it was really just one layer. Even though it was multiple different systems involved, it was still a single access control card. What would have been a good layer for that company at the time would have been to have security cameras pointed at the doors on their floor. Now you've got a second layer completely unrelated, and you could see. Mm-hmm. You could even add alerts so that if it detects a person, you can do this at your house, right? If you buy an Arlo camera, for example, they're pretty popular. They're relatively inexpensive. You put them at your house, and you can get an alert that says animal detected at the front door, or a ring, or something like that. Person detected in the driveway, car detected in the driveway. And now you've got an alert on your phone that says, oh gosh, there's something going on here. Companies can do the same thing. So now you've got not just the access control, but you've got somebody who's monitoring alerts, hopefully 24/7 for you. So that's a second layer. A third layer in that example they gave you would have been a clean desk policy with locked cabinets. Because now you've got a locked cabinet that someone has to get into. It's not particularly hard to get into locked cabinets, but it slows them down. You could have had business critical documents or documents with personal identifiable information that's in print, stored in a safe. That would be another layer. So it's all about layered, but the thing just to keep in mind is that adversaries are going to take advantage of complexity. And it comes to people, process, and technology. So I described the process with you buying a widget and going to AWS, and then it going to on-prem, and then it going to Azure. That's a process complexity. People complexity as well. If you're at a large company and someone is wearing an official shirt that says elevator repair and carries a clipboard. There was a guy at one of the security conferences. He went into an elevator. You can get elevator keys off of Amazon very cheaply. You go into an elevator, and he put a out of order sign on it, and then he stood there for 5 hours until the place closed. And he turned off the elevator. People were knocking, trying to get it done. He called in, the little call button, said, "We're in here. We're working on this. Don't worry about it." After hours, he came out, but he was official because he had a clipboard, and he had a shirt that said Elevator Repair. It was a fictitious company, but some of the front desk said, "Oh, that's great. You're going to fix this for us. Awesome. Thank you." That's an example of people. You see it digitally from where people click on emails. That they shouldn't. Dave just sent me a request asking for me to go to 7-Eleven and get gift cards for all the employees of Leading Giants, right? Yeah, maybe not.
7-Eleven gift card, that seems pretty generous.
Yeah, right.
That's a great employee gift. I don't know about these guys. Let's not get carried away.
I know of somebody who they were in the financial sector. I wasn't directly involved in it, but I heard, I know the people, and they were investing into a financial instrument. Their email was compromised, and so they created and they're patient, because when you're going after large amounts of money, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you're patient. Someone said to me once, it used to be that you need to have a gun and a kerchief to go rob a bank, and you'd end up with $5 million. Now in 5 minutes, if you imitate the right person, you get $5 million and no one can trace it. That's kind of the world we live in. And so they had their email compromised. The adversary created a lookalike domain with one letter off. They kicked off the person from the chain that was supposed to be on the chain, said, "Hey, I'm actually Joe. We're having a problem with our bank today. Here's revised wire instructions." The person who was, transferring the money didn't verbally call, and as a result, transferred, a couple $1 million, and it's gone to a bank account that was operated by an adversary, and then within, seconds, it's dispersed all over the world. Yeah, so businesses have some real risks there.
So there's so many different questions. What percentage of companies, I want to hit this in a couple of different levels.
Yeah.
You're a small business.
Right.
You're on the corner and you're a coffee shop. You're doing $250,000 a year.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden now you're still a small business, but you're doing 10 million, 15, 20, 30 million. Then you get into, small, medium, 50, 100 million.
Yep.
And these companies, those size, what percentage of them are deficient in their own self-protection by way of cybersecurity?
That's a complicated.
It is. I asked it at too many
question.
levels.
No, but that's okay. But let me see if this works for you. So Verizon every year puts out a data breach investigation report. A lot of folks in the cyber community look at it and read it and comb through. It's usually a couple hundred pages, and it's like 5,000 to 10,000 incidents that they analyze, and they analyze the demographics around those. And so I've got a couple of statistics for you. In 2024, 43% of all data breaches involve small and medium businesses. So you'd think it would be the large, enterprises, but 43% of them because they're less protected, right? 68% of those breaches involve a human element of some kind.
So, for example,
someone clicks on a phishing email.
Okay.
Someone someone is tailgating through security and they let them go because they want to be polite. Right, so things like what they don't count are errors or misconfigurations of like, hey, I misconfigured the server, it was a mistake, I'm not malicious. They don't count those. These are actually like people being taken advantage of by bad actors, basically, is the way to think about it.
Yeah, one time I was It was funny. As a pilot, I would always go in. I had a small airplane that I would just go enjoy flying and small trips and whatnot. And security at airports is very, very intense.
Yeah.
And you will lose your certificate or all sorts of things if you're pulling into a gate, somebody's behind you, and you let them come in. So you have to wait at a certain spot every single time until that gate is 100% closed and then move up. So there is a CEO of a large company, billion-dollar company, who I knew, and he didn't have his pass or didn't have his clearance at all, and I pull up, and he's behind me. Here's this.
Don't you know who I am?
This moment of compromise.
Yes.
And he is like, I got to get on my plane. And he had a beautiful jet that he was trying to catch a flight on. I got to get on my plane. Da 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 da. And I said, hey man, I can't. I can't do that. And he goes, I know. He was a humble guy. And he called me. We didn't really know each other at this point, but then he called me a little while after that. There was kind of a mutual connection. We got together and had a dinner. Not even about that, just kind of about business and mostly cars, really, because he's a car guy too. But I remember this compromised circumstance where I was like, man, I really want to let this guy in, but it's just not worth it. And he made his flight, but I just know the pressure. There's a lot of pressure for that sort of thing.
There is a lot of pressure. Talk about why do adversaries attack small companies, or why do attack companies in general? And I'm going to look at my notes here for a second, but about 60% of the people who attack are organized crime. Only, people, small companies, I've heard it a lot of times say, well, if Russia or China or North Korea or Iran, who are the main, nation state actors that go after espionage and money. North Korea funds their entire economy, I think. Maybe it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but they're like hundreds of millions and billions of dollars a year that they steal from the rest of the world. If a nation state comes after me, my little mom and pop, there's nothing I can do about it. Well, the reality of it is it's only about 5% of the time that those are the actors that are doing it. 9% is kind of another category, and end users, mainly mistakes like I talked about 26%. So go back to the organized crime. So 60% of this are organized crime that are trying to make money. The motive is financial. 92% of the time, the motive is financial, 7% espionage, and 1% just...
So we obviously we're not talking about the same thing. You think of organized crime by way of, Capone back in the day. And are we talking about a new type of organized crime? We're not talking about necessarily the traditional mob families, or are we also talking about that?
Yeah, I can't answer that because I don't have firsthand knowledge.
Okay.
But let me give you an example of what organized crime does. So another way to think about it is someone shows up at some Eastern European country and they go to work. They sit down in front of their computer and they're creating software, they're marketing, they're doing customer support. It just so happens that their entire enterprise is criminal. A company called Trustwave that does a study of the underbelly of the internet and looks at this. There are multiple dark web websites that have stood up malware and phishing as a business, right? So phishing being where you send somebody emails, malware being where you install it and you compromise a network. You can get a U.S. credit card from malware actors for anywhere from the current price is $10 to $40 for one credit card with it's $40 if it's got a $5,000 or more limit. It's $10 if it's got under $5,000. You pay $10, you get someone's credit card information. You can charge it once or twice before it gets shut off. These are businesses that's what they do. That's how they make their money. They're making millions and billions of dollars a year. Well, how do they do it? They have ransomware as a business platform. So you think about SaaS platforms. Just give me an example of this one that Trustwave called out. It's phishing as a service. You sign up for it for under $200 a month, so you're a criminal. You need software to do your job, to get all these things.
So they go, first of all, they buy this pack.
Yes,
here.
it's exactly what it is.
Okay, and then they buy these other criminal packs available online. Is there like criminalsolutions.com?
It's on the dark web, so it's not .com. You won't see it that way. But what does it provide you? Think about what a SaaS provides you. So it provides you templates for phishing, like pre-done templates. You just click and send this so it looks like a Microsoft logon or an AWS logon or whatever SaaS company you're using. It's got website cloning and generator tools. So they can look like they're landing on Leading Giants, but it's Leading Giants with an extra S, or it's something else with a special character. But they can automatically, through software, duplicate your website in seconds. That's part of the $200 a month. They have real-time dashboards, right? So the overall performance of their phishing emails, they track the open rates, they track the click-through rates, just like an SEO campaign would do for marketing in the white world, so to speak. They sell you captured credentials and session cookies from your PC, meaning that if someone compromised your PC, you might never know it. They take your information, and then they sell it as part of their phishing as a service platform to you. They have MFA, multi-factor. So when multi-factor is you have a username, a password, and then you have to enter something on your phone. So now you've got 3 different checks, or you get 2 checks, something you have and something you know. Something you know is a password, something you have is a phone. They have bypass tools for MFA that come as part of this phishing platform. Another thing that is provided is when you go to websites and they say, well, click on all the pictures of the bicycles as a way to verify that you're a human. They've got scripts that will automate that entire thing for you. They're called CAPTCHA automation. They've got obfuscation tools that when you create your templates and send them to Dave Durand or to anyone else, they are meant to bypass spam filters and meant to bypass security software. They construct the emails in such a way that they can just get right in. They have mass email campaigns. So think about HubSpot or Salesforce or anyone else. You can do mass phishing email campaigns using this. And this is the one that cracks me up. They have tutorials and support. So you're a criminal, you're an adversary, right? And you sit down, hey, look, this template looks a little wonky. 1-800-criminal platform.
They have customer service for criminals.
They have customer service for criminals using their platform. So that kind of, now step back, and that changes your frame of reference. It's a business. They just want to get money, and they're going to get money, and people are going to be smart about it.
So I'm fascinated by so many different things. So they provide this as a service. Do the criminals pay their bills? I mean, here you've got this whole criminal society, which, yes, we're going to provide you a service as long as you pay your bills. And I suppose they're just kind of holding them hostage that way, that even though we know you're dishonest and we're selling something to a dishonest person to do a dishonest thing, if you don't pay us, we're going to cut off your access to what you're making. And so it's just kind of this power club.
It's like any other SaaS company, right?
That is unbelievable.
Yeah. They usually get paid in Bitcoin on the dark web or some other blockchain non-currency, but yeah.
Okay, so all right, let's come back to, first of all, keep going, but I do want to let you know, at some point I want to come back to what's happening to the local small business and what they need to do to make changes in this. First, go ahead and keep scaring them, Dave.
No. But so I think I've completed painting the picture for you at this point.
Yeah.
So, right, so you've got, let me just show you this little guy. These have been outlawed in some countries now to bring in. It's called a Flipper Zero. Okay. It is it's got pins on the back. It's meant as a development tool. The bar trick with this one is it's all pre-built software. You can write your own software, but the bar trick is it's got a way to intercept TV signals. And so you're in a bar, the remote control signals, and you start randomly turning off TVs in the bar or in the restaurant, right? Yeah. Yes, it works. I won't tell you how I know.
Yes.
You can capture car key fobs on it. You just have to train it. You can capture RFID cards on it. So think about a hotel or even your front door, Dave. You could, if I trained it long enough.
Not my front door. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you don't have an RFID card. You've got the physical lock, so you're better.
Okay.
But think about anything that uses an RFID card. It can capture a certain class of those. It can do a whole bunch of things. They're meant to be experimental tools. So you combine that along with these other gadgets. This thing is another Hack5 device, but it's called a Wi-Fi Pineapple. I've got one that's called a Coconut as well. It's a next generation. This thing captures Wi-Fi signal because you can't see it and you'll never know. If you're within range of a Wi-Fi signal, every time that you want to connect your phone, it keeps a list of all the networks you've connected to. And it says, hey, Leading Giants, are you there? Hey, Walmart, are you there? Hey, hotel, are you there?
Can we stop using Leading Giants as an example?
Well,
I'm fine with the Walmart example.
Yeah, so wherever you've connected your phone.
Yeah.
it keeps a list generally, unless you manually go and delete it. So if you look at your phone today and went to Wi-Fi, you could see all these networks that you've connected to. It could be your car, it could be a hotel, whatever it is. And the way it knows, it'll start broadcasting and say, are you there? So if you've got automatically connect on those networks, so it's a convenience, it's broadcasting, are you there? Are you there? This guy says, oh yeah, I'm here, connect. And so now you connect to this. And it forwards your signal. There's some technical details I won't get into, but it authenticates you. It forces you to re-enter your password. Guess what? It captures that stuff. And then it connects you to the actual network. Or it drops and says, oh, you know what? I'm not here anymore. So this is just a thing that sits there. And so that in that case I told you about where someone broke into a building for a company, to compromise the Wi-Fi, they went onto the floor above, which was for rent. They had a device similar to this one, and they were able to break into the Wi-Fi at that company as well.
Unbelievable.
So now I'm done with these are the things that can happen. So it's, because you could argue, well, you need physical access. That's true. And that's the reason that I brought up the phishing as a platform, so, as a service, because you don't need physical access. This is over the internet. So, small company. Let me get back to your question now. There's a couple of things you can do. The first one is, kind of figure out and the bare minimum is, what compliance requirements do you have to meet? Do you have state regulations? If you're in New York State, there's a lot of financial service regulations. If you're in California, there's Consumer Protection Act, which protects consumer privacy. If you're in South Carolina, there is a lot of cybersecurity regulations around insurance companies. There's some federal laws as well. So what are you required to comply with from a regulatory agency? And then what do your customers want to know that, your data is safe? I want to be your customer, Mr. Business, but I want to know that you're safe. And so there's industry standard compliances, something like the SOC 2 or the NIST certification, which is created by the government and industry groups in the US. If you're doing medical data, there's HIPAA. People are familiar with the HIPAA laws. If you're processing credit card information, there's PCI. So you figure out what your regulatory requirements are or what bar you want to set. You run an assessment against all of your assets and say, okay, here's where we are from a compliance with these different regulations or frameworks. And then you come up with a project management plan. It says, okay, boom, 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 we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this, and then it's done. And you want to keep track of it every year. Along the way, you have to make decisions. And when you talk about risks, the risk of a meteorite hitting my small business, the impact would be huge, depending on the size of the meteorite, but the likelihood is, zero, basically, for all practical intents and purposes. The impact of someone breaking my plate glass window is probably pretty big. The likelihood is probably pretty high, right? If you're a retail, if you're a retail. So those are the sort of conversations you get into with a business owner. And how can we help? How can we help you secure that thing? You work with whoever's you outsourced your IT to, or your IT person that you've got in house. You set the controls in place.
It would seem to me that 95% of SMBs are not fully protected.
There's some stats around that I just don't remember off the top of my head. I don't think it's quite that high, but it's pretty high. It's well above 70%.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Dave, I want to go to, in a moment, I want to talk about how companies fix this, okay?
Yeah.
Before I do that, though, how freaked out should individual people be? Does the working remote thing affect things just individually? Let's say a person says, well, I don't own a business, but I just have my regular household that I'm dealing with. Do people pay attention that much to the individual consumer, or are they going directly after the companies mostly for this?
No, I mean, it's both, right? For the most part, if 60% of companies are experiencing breaches that are run by organized crime and are financially motivated, I don't have statistics on consumers, but roughly adversaries want to monetize you. And monetize could be stealing a credit card, could be access to your bank accounts. They don't care about spying. There's TV shows that have done this. You have a baby monitor that can be compromised and someone's spying on my baby. Yeah, but that's like such an odd thing, right? Like the things you want to protect as an individual are anything related to money and anything related to your financials. So, titles to houses, titles to cars, your credit card information, your bank information, things like that. The complication right this second is that the world changes. And we mentioned this kind of at the beginning where there's so many complicated moving parts in security. And it's kind of whack-a-mole. Something emerges, it gets patched, so you can't use that vector anymore. Adversary finds a new vector because there's new technology being introduced. Mm-hmm. We had iPhones, we have watches, we've got AirTags. No one ever thought that AirTags would be used to stalk people when they initially came out. They are now, right? So there's all these different vectors that happen. So it's a constantly evolving thing. Easy to get overwhelmed.
There's
a couple hints really quick. So number one is every account that you have, you want to have multi-factor authentication enabled. If your bank doesn't do it, I'd consider switching banks. And multi-factor is when you log on to your bank or your mobile system on your phone or your computer, it prompts you so you enter your username, password, and then it prompts you for a number. And the ideal is not that it texts you something, because those can be compromised as well using SIM swap technology. But there's a dedicated application. Microsoft has an application. Google has an authenticator application. You call that up, and you enter the number that's there into your banking logon information. Your Capital One card, your Discover card, your MasterCard, Visa, whatever you've got, you want to make sure that you've got MFA enabled on everything. Number two, and I hate it, and it's changing slowly now, but it is passwords, right? And so number two, from a consumer perspective, from a Dave Mosher perspective, is get a password manager. If you look up password manager, you'll see a bunch of them on the internet. I personally like Keeper Security, but that's just a personal preference. There's LastPass, there's 1Password, there's others. And basically you have to remember 1Password at that point. And you don't write that down, you don't store it anymore. And that 1Password is the password in your password manager. And then it logs and tracks all of your websites for you, all of your banking accounts for you, and says, okay, D Mosher, and I want to specify a 25-character password with special symbols and stuff. And then when I get to that website, the password manager just automatically fills it in for you.
So if your 1Password that you have to access that is compromised, are all of them compromised?
Yeah, potentially.
Okay.
Which is why you don't write it down, which is why you memorize it.
Yeah.
It's why it's got to be safe. But like we're asked now, and I did this a personal assessment, I've got over 300 passwords that I use as just Dave, right?
Yeah.
How the heck am I going to remember 300?
Yeah.
So what people have done is, I'm going to use the same password, add a number to it. Well, that's bad.
Yeah.
It's easily figured out when you've got computers that can do that today, and AI and everything else. Mm-hmm. So password safety and use a password manager, enable MFA, and then just kind of situational awareness. And what I mean by that is there's technology now that will allow you to imitate someone's voice. There's technology that will allow you to imitate someone's video. So I could be talking to you, and if I get the software running in between, I'm on Zoom or I'm on Microsoft Teams or whatever it is, it looks like Dave Mosher, but it's actually Joe in Russia or wherever, right? And it'll sound exactly like me. And so the third thing is just, think about when someone comes to you with a strange, out of the ordinary request, I'll call you back. Right? And let me give you a number. No, I'm going to get the number from either I have it or I'm going to look it up on the internet as a third party. I'm not going to call the number you give me. Right? And a lot of times elderly people get scammed by this. My nephew, my niece, my grandson has been in an accident. They're in jail. They need $10,000. One of my daughters was subject to this. She was in tears until I got on the phone and said, go away. Right, but they sound very realistic. They represent themselves with authority in some cases.
They always have an emotional connection to that.
They always have an emotional connection. So talk about using influence and persuasion.
Yeah,
in a negative sense. In
literally,
this case,
the type of thing where you say to yourself, "I want to just call this spam. I want to call this some sort of cyber threat." But I just can't, because what if in that tiny little percentage it's true?
That's right.
I had one like that. This is early on. This goes back to probably 2007 or 8 or something like that. So this was not quite as known. But I was in a non-for-profit. And I was leading the non-for-profit. I was building one of the branches. You would know it, by the way. And one of the people in it who's just this sweet lady who was, kind of harmless. I get this email now that anybody would recognize, but this is just as it was coming out. I'm in Europe. I lost my wallet. I need money. I can't get home. I don't know who to get a hold of. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way. I know this is not real because how dumb would you have to be? And I thought, well, she probably doesn't have a big network, and I know she doesn't come from means, so maybe she's just kind of reaching out to me at the last thing. Odds of this, 0.0001. Very, very easy way to find out if this is true. I'm going to call her manager and ask if he knows that she's
In Europe?
in Europe.
Yeah.
I call him and he says, yes, absolutely, she's there. That's real. And I think to myself, I am so glad that I called because this looked totally fake. I worried $1,000 and it wasn't her.
Yeah.
And the one factor that I could have used to determine that this is real, and the guy was just lazy with his answer. And he didn't say she might be. He goes, yes, absolutely, that's her. That's real. And I went to him for the explanation of that. I said, how did you tell me? You didn't ambiguously say, look into this, maybe not, she might be. I thought, yes, absolutely, that is her. Help her. I'm like, if I'd have done that to somebody else, I'd have written a check to them for $1,000 for stealing their money. Because there's no explanation for that, by the way. There's just no explanation. Yeah. And he had no explanation other than I thought, but anyway.
You handled it the right way. You went to a known party, you trusted party.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's a bulletproof way to find out.
Yeah.
Is to find out from their actual direct supervisor whether or not they are actually gone and in that place. And it still didn't even work for me. Yeah, one of those things where I don't think I really even felt that stupid because the approach that I took was actually a reasonable approach to not be a fool, and I ended up being a fool anyway. Okay, so we're talking about
personal protection.
Personal protection right now. Are there other things that people should do on a personal level?
Yeah, I would add one more thing, which is educate your family and your kids. Right? You don't want them clicking on stuff that is false. You don't want them responding to emergencies, right? So, hey, child of mine that I love, here's our family password. Right? If you are trying to get a hold of me for something, I need to know if it's actually you because there's a lot of bad people in the world who will imitate you. I'm going to ask you for your password. Don't forget this password. It could be pie, Jello, it doesn't have to be some complicated thing, Jesus, whatever it is. Just remember that password. So educate them, talk to them about, as you hear about cyber threats, talk to them about it, right? There are lots of security awareness trainings that when you buy them for a company, they'll allow you to use them for family and friends as well. Ninjio is a good example. Ninjio does these 4-minute cartoons. They're spectacular. They're case studies. I think they're spectacular. There's another one called Symbol Security. They're good as well. But they have these videos, and then you can share it with your family. So you're keeping your family, because the company's perspective is, listen, if I've got an employee who's working from home and they get breached, that's a way back into my company. So I'm going to extend the security awareness training to their families as well, and hopefully they take advantage of that. And it's usually included as part of your general licensing costs.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 questions that I know come up a lot.
Yeah.
Are people really listening to me on my phone? And it's almost impossible not to believe that they are, because you can make some random statement that you haven't talked about in forever, and all of a sudden that image shows up in your phone, or it shows up in your advertising or something like that. And then in a related thing, because there's always this, they're listening to me. First of all, who's they?
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, what are they doing with this information? Are they going to blackmail somebody, or why are they going to censor you? Are you going to be, locked out of something because you have a political opinion? Or is this happening? Do you know anything around this?
Yeah, let me ask you a question. I mean, this is a bad philosophical thing to answer a question with a question, but I'll answer it directly in a second. If you had to guess, how many apps do you have on your phone?
If I had to guess, maybe 100.
Okay. And how many of those are free?
I would guess maybe 40%.
How are they making money?
Well, advertising is how most of them.
Yeah. How do they know what to advertise?
Because I'm talking about it?
Yeah.
Okay, so they are listening.
Like they is kind of a general statement, but
Yeah.
And when you say listening, I use Waze as an example. I love Waze. It's a free app,
Yeah.
right? It tracks everywhere I go, all the time. So there's a book, and this is when I got my master's in cyber. I had to use this book for one of my classes, and I love it. It's a little dated. It's probably 2016, 2017 timeframe, but it's still, the industry's still there and still working overtime. It's called Data and Goliath, and it's all about the data broker industry and how how we are the product, and they're collecting information about us and selling it every single day. So when you have those 40% of your apps that are free, are they listening to you? Maybe. Now, they would say it's anonymized, we're just using it for marketing purposes, et cetera. Yeah, it's probably
But
true.
like audibly listening.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, in some cases. When Alexa first came out, there were cases of you had to disable Amazon's ability to use your voice to help train their AI models. Because they said, oh, that's all we use it for. Well, some security investigators came up and said, well, actually, you've captured some really interesting conversations and store them in your data centers and things like that, right? So Amazon's got a lot better since then. But the point, it illustrates that a lot of these apps, if it's free, they're making money somehow, and how are you contributing to that? Are they capturing your web browsing? Are they capturing your location data so that they can give you relevant ads as you walk by their store? Are they capturing, so it's geotagging, geolocation stuff?
Strangely enough, even though we're all kind of subject to that,
Yeah,
most SMBs and definitely large companies use that information.
of course.
So we are not only being subject to having it taken from us, but we're kind of like compliant in that, well, that's okay because I can also buy that information, or I at least use that information to target my clients too.
Right.
And it's kind of like this, it's almost like, the Patriot Act to a certain degree. Well, let me give up this freedom in order to get this benefit, right? And it's like that by way of this. Anything else on that? I was going to ask you about SM. So let's getting into this. So if we look at the large companies.
Right. Large companies, they've got their own IT staff. They probably have a dedicated chief information security officer. They probably have the best of the best in security tools that they can afford. Their budget is astronomical. Their budgets are larger than the revenue for a lot of small and medium-sized business just for security, right? Okay. They have their own sets of problems. We could talk about that, but let's back up now. Now you're at a company that's a couple hundred employees down to 20 employees or somewhere in that neighborhood. And you may or may not have IT, right? So that's the first thing. Are you outsourcing your IT? Okay. And then the second thing is, which is fine, you could have an in-house IT. You've got 500 people. You've got a couple people working for you for IT. It's hard to maintain and train and keep them interested, but you've got them, so you might have high turnover, but you still got your own IT department. That's great. Most likely you don't have your own chief information security officer at that stage because it's $250,000 to $500,000 a year salary plus benefits, right? And that's an astronomical sum.
I would suppose that maybe you could have somebody who is maybe an IS who also has some background in that can double duty on that.
I think a lot of companies do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get what you pay for, right, in terms of experience and what they're going to be able to do for you and so on. So, but yeah, that is a very common solution.
Yeah. Now, do you guys help place people like that?
No, we don't do that. So the services that we offer are virtual chief information security officer. So you get a slice of time and services, and I've invested into a bunch of software tools and a bunch of automation, and we hire people who are highly skilled at this stuff to go in and do your assessments, come up with a strategy for you, help you make the decision on what to secure versus what you're going to accept the risk on, help you sort through like what's absolutely necessary versus what's some techno whiz bang thing that the vendor's trying to sell to you right now. Really, the basics are, what are your risks? Identify your vulnerabilities. Patch all the time. A lot of people say, well, you patch once a month. That's, vulnerabilities happen. What do you do in the 3 weeks and 6 days, if a vulnerability comes out the next day? You want to be patching your systems all the time. And there's a lot of automation that can go with that today. And then the last thing is security awareness. It's train your staff. You could do what I did, which was an extreme thing, penetration tests and hire a red team and things like that. But you can also do monthly video series and quizzes and make it part of their HR reviews and things like that. But really, the investment, if you use Rendon's cyber, is to get expertise, get tooling, and then help you walk through the strategy and implementation over time in a way that makes sense to you as a business person, aligns with your goals.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. Do you find that companies are resistant to this sort of change, or they're very open? They, like when you bring the problem to them,
yeah,
do they say, "I hadn't even thought of that. Please fix this," or are they just not really? Are they? It's not that big of a deal. Where would you say they're?
It's sometimes, yeah. I mean, sometimes that is the case, right? And sometimes
to their peril, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I love the stories, and these are real stories that I've told. But it's, when you come from a place of fear, it's easy to say no, right? When you come from, what I'd rather say is, security can enable your business to grow. And so if you're able to approach, and your lens is that. Let me give you an example. Third-party risk management should be a critical part of every business's security. Third-party risk management is just validating your vendors, right? So I did a validation of a background check company. Company wanted to hire background services for employees and contractors, which is a good thing to do. Do you have any felonies? Are you a sex offender or whatever, right? And just standard stuff. Well, it turned out that the first company I evaluated had just gone through a merger. There was a roll-up consolidation going on in the industry. Their security program was ridiculous. They only required 6-character passwords, right? And a bunch of other things that it could go into. I'm like, I would not trust these people with any of my employee information. You want me to put my social security number up there? Forget about it, right? And so I went to the business and said, listen, let's find another one. I'll evaluate them as well. And the evaluation takes 2 hours, 3 hours to do. And you talk to the company and go back and forth. Okay, let me see your security program documentation. Then I review it against, what industry best practices would be, and give a report to the company and say, look, the inherent risk is high because you're talking about employee personally identifiable information. The residual risk and the likelihood is high because they're an immature security program, or because they've got the following controls in place. It's a low risk to you. And now we've enabled the business to make a relatively low risk from a security perspective decision on background checks. And apply that across all your critical vendors, right? Anything that's handling data that you need to protect. So third-party risk management is a big area.
Yeah, and it's pretty proportionate to solutions are proportionate to the size of companies.
That's right.
For this sort of thing,
That's
because
right.
the risk is proportionate to the size of the company and this sort of thing.
Yep.
Huh. That's fascinating. So how does this shape you? Just you yourself, Dave. When you're just going about the day, you see a view of things. It's almost like you remember the show Monk?
Yes.
So
we love that show.
Yeah,
it's a family.
It's a great song. And this song, I can't remember what song, but it says something like, "If you knew what I knew, you'd be worried too," or something.
Yes,
like that.
that's right.
I might be wrong, but I don't think so.
Yes.
So you know things that other people don't know, and there's got to be some sort of cyber equivalent to washing your hands constantly. Or do you just say, well, you can't live that way?
Well, first of all, living that way would be living in fear, and I don't do that, right? Realistically aware of a lot of things that are going on, sure. There's certain vendors I won't use. I won't mention them. There's certain large companies that I'm like, nope, I'm not going to use them because I know what they do with the data in the back end. And then you learn things as well. Like SiriusXM, which I love, by the way. I'm not giving this one up, but I looked at their privacy policy and then traced it. I'll just give you an example, and then traced it all the way through. They have 47 different parties at the time they looked at this about 2 years ago that they give your data to.
Wow.
Now, we're just tracking we're tracking for ads, whatever. Well, but so you have to live your life. Am I going to give up SiriusXM because they're giving my data from what I listen to and where I'm traveling with that radio? No, it offers a value to me.
Yeah, so you're measuring the risk against the reward, and you have to do that in life for everything. I mean, literally, you couldn't leave your house. You couldn't get dressed because the very thing you're going to put on is going to give you a rash and kill you, whatever. I mean, there's certain things you need to do just to live. Well, that's good. So any other last things you want to leave our viewers with that make sense to have them hear by way of cybersecurity?
No, just if you're interested, we're launching officially the website in April.
I think people will be interested. Again, give the name of the website. your
Yeah,
contact
it's
information?
Rindon, RHINDON, cyber.com.
Okay.
And there's a landing page, a really hokey landing page right now, but I've got a first-class marketing firm, and within the next 3 to 4 weeks, it'll all be live.
It is a landing page, so that if you visit, you are not going to lose your information to some other third party.
That's
because
correct.
They're going to protect that information when you
Yep,
go
that's
to the
right.
landing page, so that they can know. All right, Dave, it is awesome having you here. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I think there's a lot of insight that people have gained through this too. So we've got. I think that there's some shorts that are going to draw some people's attention to this well too, because there's so many different things that you said in there that make people want to say, I got to know more about that. That's pretty awesome.